All right. Hi, everybody. And doing my best to get started here. Time for maybe one program. And sometimes I lose the text of the program I was working on. And this is the case here, but you will see it on the video. I use different colors, but the one on which I was working with colors has disappeared, and it seems it seems rather hard to find it unless for some reason it's buried in the recycle bin, and it doesn't appear to be there. So we will go on. We're talking about the preparatory work for the externalization of the hierarchy. We're talking about the disappearance of the groups which came into existence prior to 1919, and we do remember that the Tibetan contacted Alice Bailey for the first kind of work with her in 1919. So basically, this may include the Theosophical Society as well, although I would say not the works of not the works of HPB. So even though the colored material is not here right now, it will be on the video. So, but basically, just to, in case we have to go back to outline the major points that he made. And the sanctified normality of the appearance of the initiates. This will be an important distinguishing characteristic. They will be the, as is said, the current politicians, businessmen, financiers, religious teachers or churchmen, scientists, philosophers, college professors, and educators. And they will be mayors of cities and the custodians of all public ethical development. So we have seen something about the planned externalization, and now we're going to go on with that right here on page 571. The preparatory work of externalization therefore falls into three phases or categories or stages as far as relation to mankind is concerned. First, the present stage in which a few isolated disciples and initiates scattered all over the world are doing the important task of destruction, plus the enunciation of principles. And those two things go together. He talked about the first ray in terms of the enunciating disciples, which and their enunciation carries destruction and the clearing of the old forms that are in the way. They are preparing the way for the first, preparing the way for the first organized body of disciples and initiates who, coming from certain ashrams, will proceed with the next phase of the work. Now, hopefully I did not record this on a zero. I'm just having a little trouble getting going here today. So that's the first stage. The second stage of the stage of the first real externalization upon a large and organized scale will succeed those of the above endeavors. And I think we've already experienced to a certain extent the first phase, a few isolated disciples here and there, and initiates scattered all over the world doing the important task of destruction plus the enunciation of principles. I think we all realize how much people who cling to certain dogmas will fight against the devaluation of those dogmas and the imputation that they are not correct, or at least only partially correct. So now we're in the stage of the first real externalization. These disciples and initiates will be the real builders of the new world, of the new civilization, and they will assume leadership in most countries and take high office in all departments of human life. This they will do by the free choice of the people and by virtue of their advanced and proven merit. All right, well, are we there yet? Probably not quite, but it will be by a democratic process that they are put into power, and they will approve themselves before the human race. By this means, gradually, the hierarchy will take over the control upon the physical plane, subjectively as well as objectively, of the direction of human affairs. The direction will be in virtue of their known and approved capacities and will not involve the imposition of any hierarchical control, authority. Yeah, control will be there, but not the imposition via authority. And this is where so many first-rate types get it wrong. They feel that they can impose their singular individual will upon the multitude instead of looking at the will of the multitude. It will simply signify the free recognition by free people of certain spiritual qualities and effective activities, which they believe signify that these men, and of course women, are adequate to the demanded job. Remember that when the Tibetan uses the word men, he means mankind, he means humanity, he means manas, that group that is characterized by intelligent emergence from the animal kingdom. So they will be recognized and by people of free people of certain spiritual qualities and effective activities, which they believe signify that these men are adequate to the demanded job and whom they therefore choose as directing agents of the coming world. Of course, in order for this to occur successfully, the people who choose have to be educated, and this is why when the lords of form are active, they seek to keep the people in ignorance so that poor choices based upon simply personality, emphasis, or affinity prevail over wise and more spiritual choices. Freedom of choice under the authority of a spiritual livingness which demonstrates competency, will be distinctive of the attitude of the general public. Men will be put into high office and into positions of power, not because they are disciples or initiates, but because they are wise and intelligent servants of the public with an internal awareness, a deeply religious and inclusive consciousness. They will be bound or linked to the higher spiritual powers, and a well-trained mind, and this is important, with an obedient brain. Because one can have a decent mind, but the brain does not reflect it and put it into expression. So the alignment between soul, mind, and brain becomes very important. So this is this secondary phase. I'm hoping that, secondary phase of externalization. The first real externalization upon a large and organized scale will succeed upon the presence, emergence here and there of disciples and initiates, enunciating that which will sweep aside, or at least put into serious questioning, the inadequate dogmas of the past. This stage of hierarchical appearance, at least initiates of the threshold here, and sometimes initiates, is dependent upon the effective service of the first group of isolated and hardworking disciples who are senior members of the new group of world servers and who are today working among the sons of men. Well, senior members of the new group of world servers would suggest that they certainly are initiates of the second degree, at least. This second group will take over from them, and theirs will be the task of instituting a more unified preparation for the return of the Christ. He uses these words interchangeably, reappearance and return, explaining to us in a way that the Christ never left and in a sense does not have to return, but his reappearance is like a return into the consciousness of the people. So the first group prepares humanity for the possibility, and the second group definitely prepares for the return itself. Where are we? Well, I think we're in a transitional phase, in a sense, between the first and second groups, with still the majority of the process of the first group holding. But you can see how everything is growing, how the numbers are growing, and how we're going to be ready before long of having real hierarchical workers, or at least very hierarchically related workers, in positions of leadership. And what a difference that will make when we compare some of the people who have sort of forced their way into prominence and have nothing but selfish motives and the grasping of power in their minds. The second group, they will build for a future which will arise out of the wreckage of the past, which wreckage they will remove. It's happening even now. They will instill certain basic concepts, cement right human relations into men's minds. Their immediate work, when they are coming into power and recognition, and that reminds one of the disciples and initiates gathered around the masters in the major planetary centers. Their immediate work, when they are coming into power and recognition, will consist of a sweetening Venus and a clarification of the political situation, and the presentation of those ideas which will eventually lead to a fusion of those principles which govern a democracy. Sweetening, very interesting term, isn't it? And how Venusian it really is. Okay. So let me repeat, their immediate group work when they are coming into power and recognition, which we can pretty well judge is not quite yet, the year being now 2020, will consist of a sweetening and a clarification of the political situation and the presentation of those ideas which will eventually lead to a fusion of those principles which govern a democracy and which also condition the hierarchical method, which is somewhat different. Okay. This time, somehow, I have to preserve this document instead of helping it to disappear, Okay. Their effort will produce a third political situation which will not be entirely dependent upon the choices of an unintelligent public or on the control which the hierarchical technique evidently involves. The mode of this new type of political guidance will later appear. So, whoops, there we go again. I'm always doing that. Sorry. Let me go up here and recapture my my bracket. Yeah. So a compromise method will emerge. A compromise political solution or methodology will emerge later. Okay, this second group, now let me just see if this is working out properly. Well, I'm not sure it is, but let me do a nice save as, and oh yes, these are the issues, yes. Version 8 and version 8 second try. And that should help us. That should help us. Okay, because the timing is correct and the date is correct. Okay, this effort will produce a third political situation, which will not be entirely dependent upon the choice of the unintelligent public. We're certainly facing that today, as there is almost a deliberate dumbing down of the public who have to apply their minds and could, if they were properly educated, to the choice of their leaders or the control of the hierarchical technique, which cannot easily be imposed, nor should it. Somewhere the Tibetan says that, okay, if it was only disciples who were running things and according to their own predilections, we would have a real split between the people and the disciples. This second group will implement the new religion, which is not yet with us, but those of us who are practicing the full moon cycles, we are part of preparing the new religion. The second group will implement the new religion. By the time they come into control of the old theological activities, will have been completely broken. People are lamenting this, of course, because they are attached to the old theology, but really it is a clearing of the decks. Judaism will be fast disappearing. Buddhism will be spreading and becoming increasingly dogmatic. Christianity will be in a state of chaotic divisions and upheavals. Oh, goodness. This is predicted as a precursor to the appearance of the new world religion. It will not be welcomed by all, for sure, and it will be, as usual, deemed ungodly and satanic and of the devil and all the rest of it, all the rest of the nonsense. But that's why we have to educate people so they understand and can interpret the kinds of events which are appearing before their eyes. And if they continued to hold to the old dogmatism, the interpretation of very positive developments would be looked at negatively. When this takes place, and the situation is acute enough, the Master Jesus will take certain initial steps towards resuming control of his church. Well, you know, the question is, were attempts already made here? This was written in the 40s, I guess 46, something like that. And we've had the first John Paul, but he didn't really have a chance to show his true intentions. And we have had the Pope John the 23rd, and we have Pope Francis. You know, this whole sequence is interspersed with more conservative popes, but they don't seem to be able to hold the intention or the imagination of the evolving Catholic Church. The Buddha will send 2 trained disciples to reform Buddhism. Other steps will also be taken in this department of religions and of education, over which the Christ rules, and he will move to restore the ancient landmarks. That's a Masonic term, so you can always be guided by truth because they will ever be there. To eliminate that which is, so Masonry obviously will be coming into increasing power and attractiveness, and he will move to restore the ancient spiritual landmarks, to eliminate that which is non-essential, and to reorganize the entire religious field, again in preparation for the restoration of the mysteries. And, you know, the Christ will be involved in that, and I think the Master R, as he seems to have the habit of externalization, he shows up very much in physical form, and these mysteries, when restored, will unify all faiths. This is such a promising anticipation. But the situation will be acute, will be painful. People will be at a loss. They will feel, many of them, that they have lost their moorings, that their ship is not safely in the harbor and maybe adrift. Well, it's interesting about the dogmatism of Buddhism. You can even see signs of that now. And all the many sects in Christianity are showing themselves. Judaism, unless it really reforms and adapts to more modern hierarchical expectations, will certainly disappear or fast disappear, especially the Orthodox approach, emphasizing so many non-essentials. You know, if you take a look at the most concrete aspects of Virgo and Capricorn, you see somewhat the brand or the trademark or the quality which distinguishes the orthodox approach. Groups of spiritually minded financiers who are conscious members of the ashram, and let's say, as DK has said elsewhere, and are on the seventh ray so often, will take hold of the world economic situation and bring about great and needed changes. All these activities built upon the preparatory work of the first group are also preparatory in nature. So elsewhere he talks about the responsibility of the financial seventh ray group and basically initiates of the first degree will assemble and be responsible for these kinds of very welcome changes. Of course, they won't be welcomed by everybody because some people will lose the power which their skill of mind in acquiring financial resources has given them. They have a certain greed, a certain insulation from what a lot of other people have to go through because of the money factor, you know, and of course it needs to be amplified, but the love of money is the root of all evil, which is another way of saying that the adherence to low desire, which can be fulfilled by what we call money, is the root of evil. We desire the wrong things because we are not intelligent enough to desire what is in line with the plan. So third, I'm always hitting the save button here, you know, because what I find is that I may not be doing so well. Yeah, that's good. And I don't want everything I've done or said to kind of disappear into the original text, although the original text is the important text. Third, so the sort of destroyers and the sweepers, the clearers emerged in the first group, the builders in the second, sort of ray 1, ray 2, and then we get into manifestation. Third, the stage wherein Christ and the masters of the wisdom can make public appearance and begin to work publicly, openly, and outwardly in the world of men. Well, plans for that are just now really being laid in this 2025 impending conclave. Plans for the actual externalization of the hierarchy, because there's a lot of ground to cover in about 100 years before the vernal equinox is really oriented towards 30 degrees of Aquarius, however that is reckoned. It's not reckoned according to constellational space. There's some other factor. The time of their coming will be dependent upon the success of the work undertaken by the first two groups. It is not possible for me to prophesy anent this matter. So many factors are involved: the earnest work of the two groups, the readiness and the willingness of mankind to learn, the rapidity with which the forces of restoration and of resurrection can rehabilitate the world, the responsiveness of advanced humanitarians and intelligentsia to the opportunity to rebuild. We're still rebuilding, but not like it was just after the Great War. But for some countries, yes, to recreate and to reorganize the factors which the new culture and the new civilization will demand, these things have to be factored in. Even the hierarchy itself, with all its sources of information, does not know how long this will take, but they are ready to move at any time. So there we have quite a statement that when we're looking for the moment or the time of the externalization, even hierarchy doesn't know it, because there has to be a willingness on the part of effectiveness on the part of the first two groups, and a willingness on the part of humanity to learn, and of all these to take advantage of the forces which are released of restoration. That's kind of an Aries factor, and resurrection is too. And all of these things have to occur, and the intelligent person has to respond. The humanitarians, they may not be occult aspirants or disciples, but they can be very effective, and in many cases more effective than those who fancy themselves to be the aspirants and disciples. You know, it's by their fruits ye shall know them. So that's the stage. That's the third stage. And then just reviewing the second, where the first real externalization upon a large and organized scale of the builders. And the first, of course, was clearing the decks, clearing the building space, the space on which the new must be built. It's so interesting that, well, as one civilization emerges after another, they oftentimes build on the very places which were sacred to the civilization or the culture they are superseding, because of the magnetism, you see, of course. And yet they demonize what succeeded, what preceded them, and yet they build on the very same magnetized places, and even adopt the traditions. And well, you know, let's say that Christianity comes along, but it built at first, whether rightly or wrongly, upon Greek philosophy, and it built upon what DK calls the blood religion of the Jews. Probably that was not supposed to happen. Probably the simple message of the Christ was meant to prevail, but it's hard to detach yourself from old habits, of old cultural habits. I think all of us have to learn how to leave behind that which is not of value anymore, and not be too sticky about it, you know, to feel that we have to drag the old with us as we are preparing to live the new, because the mixture is to a degree unwholesome, and a lot of things have entered Christianity which compromise it, and maybe not in the very beginning, maybe it was purer in a sense, but then the accretion began, and the building on the basis of the old began, and the taking forward of the old and useless began, and that those old and useless methods were integrated into what should have been a new presentation. So let us be aware of that. This is not to say that, you know, we must forget what Blavatsky wrote. we must keep it very much in mind. Of course, the impulse was very much Master DK and also Master M and KH. And we won't want to forget what Alice Bailey has written down for the Tibetan when we enter into the third presentation, which is coming around the year 2025. So we're really in that spirit of anticipation for what is coming. But there are some dogmas, rigidities, limitations of thought, basically illusions, which have to be jettisoned, thrown overboard, maybe burned, something. They have to be, their effect upon human thinking has to be alleviated, because they don't really lead into the future as the plan conceives that future, or as those who really know the plan conceive that future. So going on here, in the meantime, as the first group struggles with the immediate problem in the outer world, and the second group still within the confines of hierarchy itself, well, that answers the question. But of course, that was back then, 46 maybe, makes due interior preparation and applies to its chosen membership the needed training and the desired orientation. The Christ and the Masters are occupied with the task of preparing for the restoration of the mysteries, which will be, we're told, so universal. Well, I would say such as Masonry is intended to be, and such as the new church is intended to be, that they will be really attractive factors in society, and will help to reorient the trend regarding that which is desirable. Right now, we are still very materialistic, and a person's highest dreams sometimes is what's called the bucket list or something, you know, things I have to do or see before I die. And they're usually fairly material things or involve travel, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the view of the ageless wisdom is not taken into consideration, and the fact that, as DK has so often said, there is no death. So there is the immediate obstructions which have to be cleared away, the building of the new, and still those builders at the writing of this were largely internal to hierarchy. Maybe some of them have emerged, I would say, and more are coming after 2025. So there's the preparation there for the reorientation, and then the Christ and the Masters, the real hierarchical initiates, have their own mode of preparing for the restoration, especially the mysteries of Masonry and the mysteries of the Church, which really in the inner sanctum have to be ultimately the same. I mean, when DK wrote Initiation Human and Solar, he wasn't saying, well, Masons will be truly initiated in this way and church members in another way. They will present their candidates, and then the laws of initiation as they exist on the inner planes will be applied. And also the banded esoteric organisms will present their candidates as well. This restoration of the mysteries will fall into three phases and will cover and include in its symbolism all phases of human unfoldment. The story of mankind will be pictorialized. Now, this suggests Masonry. He has said, you know, that there's kind of a problem for first and seventh ray types, which Masonry seems to serve. not exclusively, of course, trouble with the imagination. And so pictorialization, the outpicturing of, in rite and ritual, of certain processes has been needed to serve those who are meant to learn through Masonry. These three phases correspond broadly and in a general sense to the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge in Masonry. You know, he mentions them basically: the entered apprentice, the fellow craft, and the master mason, or maybe he's going to talk about the mark degree. So these 3 phases correspond broadly and in a general sense to the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge in Masonry. The analogy is not entirely accurate owing to the unavoidable degeneracy of Masonry. You know, it too has suffered from embalmment or embalming. And it too has become materialistic. But with the restoration of the mysteries, Masonry will also come into its own. So what are the 3 phases? The restoration of the mysteries will come out in 3 phases. So let's take a look at what they may be. Okay, and then I read this. Okay, these 3 phases are: number 1, the stage of a general recognition of light in all departments of human living. This is inferred in the first stanza of the new invocation. It was new then, the great invocation as we know it. If the ritual of the EA, entered apprentice, is studied in the light of this information, the significance will emerge. The poor and destitute candidate emerges into the light. He's always seeking more light in Masonry, which means basically more light at this stage in building the Temple of Solomon, the causal body on the higher mental plane. So always light is the quest, one of the great quests of Masonry, just as it is for our planetary logos, until a great station of light is created. Okay, so this is the pursuit of light and its gratification. The restoration, this restoration will fall into 3 phases. Okay, restoration of the mysteries. Well, we all have to be very interested in that, and no doubt we'll be participating in that as we proceed into other incarnations and so forth. The second, the stage of complete economic reorientation. In this, humanity is relieved of all economic anxiety, and there's so much now. You know, just take a look at the coronavirus and how the preservation of society in terms of its health has necessitated an economic setback of a major kind. And to simply fly hopefully in the face of that situation is ignorance already. Well, this is very current stuff, but already Texas, the state which has opened or gone back to the pre-social distancing phase, is suffering a great increase in deaths from the virus. And that's going to be happening, I fear, widely for those states in the United States, and there are countries which are doing the same, who opened recklessly, prematurely, almost flying in the face of inevitability. But anyway, the relief of economic anxiety and is free to receive its due wages and the right reward of all service rendered in the building of the temple of the Lord. This building proceeds with rapidity. This is, in a way, the causal body of humanity and of the various nations which comprise humanity, each with its own part of the causal body of humanity, each with its own causal body. So complete economic reorientation. We're in the process right now, and those who are hanging on for dear life to the sources of their wealth, artificially garnered in many cases, will be in for great disappointment. Number three, the stage wherein the reward of light is received and the reward of service rendered. The reward of light is received and the reward of service rendered. Spiritual status is recognized through the medium of what is regarded as a major initiation, for which the first two initiatory degrees are only preparatory. A real initiation begins with the third, the first true initiation. Others are, as we know, initiations of the threshold. The first great initiation will be objectively staged, and the general public will recognize it as the major rite and ritual of the new religious institution of the period. I think he does mean the first initiation here, because there are some lesser preparatory initiations which precede the great monastic initiations, which begin with the birth of the Christ in the heart. That's my opinion on this anyway. So the first degree is the first major rite and ritual of the new religious institution of the period. This is the stage where the forces of resurrection are active. It's Aries, okay? When the Lord is with his people and Christ has returned to earth. Religion is then recognized as an attitude, binding us again to the real sources of spirituality, recognized as an attitude governing all phases of the human experience. All right. Well, again, I'm really hoping, yes, that I seem to be doing the right thing in saving more frequently. When you get wrapped up in what you're saying and you don't save, and maybe you don't have your computer set to automatic save, then you lose things. But fortunately, the main point of all this is the videos that appear, which hopefully bring a certain amount of amplification on the great teaching which has been bestowed upon us by the Tibetan as the messenger, responding to the permission of his superiors, the permission to do so. Well, we have maybe just a little more. I think, I tend to want to keep things a little bit in their own categories. So I don't see, even though we're only at approximately 50 minutes, I don't think I see the reason to go ahead with this next session, because the unit of study, this particular program and the program I did, I think it was yesterday, I hope so, they take into consideration the emerging factors. Let's see if I can find them. I think, well, let's see, where would they be? Okay, well, yeah, they're rather back here. And yeah, modes of approach. We've been dealing in 2 programs with modes of approach. And here we have August 1946. What a great sense of relief. The United Nations, that's another way of talking about those on the side of democracy and hierarchy. What a great relief they must have felt by that time. The war was behind and the benefits were emerging. So that was 559, and we've gone up to about 500 and yeah, we've gone up to this is the part where I had colored everything in, whether that helped or not, and written some additional comments, but they'll be in the video, even though what can I say, the computer ate my homework, you know. So anyway, steps in the externalization process, okay. And then we began with program number 72. And right here, and we'll be going on to program 73. So, whoopsie. So, like so. And this has taken us from 571 to 568, 571 to right here, 575. By the time I'm finished with all of this housekeeping, it'll be the time for 1 hour. 571 to 575. Okay. Now, let's put this where it belongs. And we'll be ready to start when next opportunity arises. So we finished with program 72 rather, and we're at page 571, and today is the 9th of June, and then we're going on to program number 73. And this is approximately, this one is approximately 55 minutes, something like that. All this to make sure I don't get lost next time, right? And we started 575. Now this is really going to be an interesting chapter because it tells you about the ashramic groups that are coming forth and what they are responsible for in their externalization. And we don't know what day this will occur, whether today or some other day. Okay, good. Now let me stop the recording, wishing you many blessings and lots of love in the group inclusive sense, brotherly love, and the love that comes out of identification. Wishing you all those things. And then proceeding. We are gradually making our way and maybe have another 125 pages to go in this book, and then circling back to the very beginning where a few, maybe 60 pages were left out. Okay, we'll stop the recording and we'll see you soon.